7 years. That's how long I gave myself to this marriage, to Daniel. I poured my heart into our home, our routines, our little traditions. I knew the rhythm of his laugh, the way he liked his coffee, the sigh he made before falling asleep. But lately, he's been off, short-tempered, glued to his phone like it held the meaning of life. I told myself it was work stress, or maybe a midlife slump, but deep down, I already knew. I just didn't want to. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, of course. I was doing laundry, nothing dramatic, just folding shirts and emptying pockets. Then I felt something stiff tucked inside his jacket. I pulled it out, a hotel receipt. My stomach sank, and then came the jewelry box. Velvet, elegant, almost mocking. Inside was a bracelet I had never seen in my life. Not on a birthday, not on our anniversary. I stood there, holding proof, and oddly, I didn't fall apart. I just went still. That night, once he'd passed out with his phone still glowing beside him, I got up. I wasn't even shaking. I just opened his messages. Deleted ones, of course, but not well hidden. And there it was. Her name, their chats, the details, the lies. It was all there, plain as day. And in that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because, somehow, he had just handed me the gift I didn't know I needed. I sat in the dark for a while, just listening to the silence. It was strange. I expected to feel rage, betrayal, something explosive. But instead, there was a quiet calm wrapping itself around me. Like my body had been bracing for an earthquake, and now that it had finally hit, I was still standing. All those little moments I had doubted myself, thinking I was too sensitive, too paranoid, suddenly made sense. I wasn't crazy, I was right. And that truth, it gave me power. In the morning, I made him coffee, just like always. I even kissed his cheek. He didn't notice a thing. He never really did he? He sat at the table, tapping away on his phone, lying through his teeth about meetings and deadlines. And I just watched him, really looked at him. Not the man I fell in love with, but the man he'd become. Self-absorbed, distracted, lazy with his deception, and all I could think was, she can have him. But I wasn't going to play the cliché. No messy confrontations, no screaming in restaurants or throwing his clothes onto the lawn. I wanted something cleaner, sharper. I didn't just want to leave. I wanted to make a statement, one that would echo. So I started paying attention, watching how he typed her name, the flowers he once sent, the places he went when he said he was at work. I gathered the pieces like a puzzle, and piece by piece, the plan started to bloom. The more I uncovered, the less I flinched. Her name was Vanessa. I found it in his contacts, saved under something pathetic like consulting lead. She lived a few neighborhoods over, apparently liked white lilies and red wine. I even found a dinner reservation he made for their anniversary. The audacity made me laugh, a real bitter laugh that echoed off my kitchen walls. It wasn't heartbreak I felt anymore. It was liberation, laced with just enough mischief to keep me going. It's funny how invisible I must have become to him. Like I'd stopped existing the moment I stopped being convenient. But oh, I was paying attention now. To everything. To every careless text. Every whispered call in the hallway. Every fake smile after he tucked his phone away. And each little detail didn't break me. It built me. Stronger, smarter, more focused than I'd been in years. He thought he was in control, but I was already steps ahead. So I kept my voice soft, my smile warm, my schedule predictable. All the while, I was planning something he'd never see coming. Not a scene, not revenge in the way he'd expect. No, I had something else in mind. Something poetic, precise, a goodbye wrapped in silk and thorns. And the best part? He'd never even realize it was coming until it had already arrived. I became two women at once. The wife he thought he still had, gentle, steady, smiling over coffee, and the woman who had woken up, sharpened by betrayal, quietly setting everything into motion. It was almost theatrical, The way he played his part without realizing I'd rewritten the script. Every late meeting was just more confirmation. Every fake apology a reminder that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't broken. I was done pretending not to know. The first thing I did was dig deeper. I learned her last name through an old payment he made on our joint account. Sloppy. A quick search led me to her profile. Vanessa liked sharing everything. Where she worked, where she jogged, her favorite brunch spot. She even posted the bouquet Daniel gave her last Valentine's. Red roses and white lilies. I memorized every detail, every preference. I wasn't collecting information. I was crafting something precise, something unforgettable. I never cried. Not once. Not when I saw her face. Not when I realized how long it had been going on. I just kept moving, steady, focused, almost graceful in my silence. I smiled at neighbors. I answered his texts with little hearts. I kissed him goodnight. But behind my calm, I was stitching together something beautiful. Because sometimes, the most devastating messages aren't shouted. They're delivered in silence, with flowers, a ribbon, and just the right words. I still remember the sound of the florist's voice when I called. Warm, cheerful, the kind of voice that had no idea it was about to help deliver the softest kind of justice. I asked if they had a delivery service. I gave the name, the address, the exact flower arrangement. Red roses, white lilies, nothing more, nothing less. Would you like to include a card? She asked. I paused, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted every single word to land like a whisper that turns into thunder. I wrote the message slowly. I wanted it to sting, not bleed. I wanted her to read it twice, once with pride, and again with the sinking feeling that she'd just been handed the truth. Thank you for taking this weight off my shoulders. Not rage, not insults, just a nudge, like I was passing a torch she had no idea was already burning out. The florist chuckled when I signed it. That's bold, she said. That's closure, I replied. Back home, Daniel walked in later that evening like nothing had changed. He dropped his keys on the counter, kissed my cheek, asked what was for dinner, and I smiled, genuinely, easily. Because I already knew. I knew that soon another woman would open her door and receive what she thought was love, wrapped in cellophane and tied with a bow. And I hoped, just for a second, she'd feel it. The weight of the truth I was about to send her way. I didn't rush it. Timing mattered. I waited until Friday, the day he usually claimed he was staying late. I pictured her lighting candles, maybe spritzing perfume, waiting for a man who was never fully hers to begin with. And while he was off spinning more half-truths, I confirmed the delivery. Scheduled for 3 p.m. sharp. I pictured the florist's van pulling up to her door, the box being handed over gently, like it carried something precious. It did, just not in the way she expected. That night I was almost giddy. I made dinner. I laughed at his bad jokes. He had no clue. Not a single crack in my mask, but inside I could feel something blooming. Not anger, not revenge. Something lighter, a sense of clarity. I wasn't sending flowers out of spite. I was sending them as a final gesture, a poetic shift in ownership. I had carried this man's weight for far too long. Now someone else could try. When I went to bed, I didn't check his phone. I didn't need to. Whatever happened next was already in motion. And the best part? I wouldn't have to lift another finger. Because sometimes, truth doesn't scream. It arrives wrapped in elegance, delivered with a smile, and signed with the calm hand of a woman who's finally done being deceived. I imagined her face when she opened the door. Maybe she smiled at first. Who wouldn't? An elegant bouquet delivered in the middle of the day. No occasion, no warning. Red roses, bold and romantic. White lilies, graceful and pure. It probably looked like love. Maybe she thought Daniel was finally making a grand gesture. Maybe she even held them close, let herself believe she'd won something. But tucked inside that beauty was a truth she wasn't ready for. The card was handwritten. I made sure of that. A printed message would have felt cold, distant. But my words? They needed to feel personal. Thank you for taking this weight off my shoulders. Not cruel, not sarcastic, just honest. And right beneath it, the part I knew would echo in her mind long after the flowers wilted. May you enjoy every lie, every late night, and every empty promise. Claire. That was my truth, handed to her like a ribbon-tied confession. I didn't check her social media right away. I didn't need the validation. But a few hours later, it found me anyway. Screenshots being passed around in group chats, then popping up on feeds. Her post, a close-up of the bouquet, the card front and center. Comments poured in like wildfire. This is art. Queen behavior. She didn't cry. She delivered. I sat there, watching strangers cheer for a story they didn't even know belonged to me, and I felt something rare. Peace. The internet can be cruel, but that day, it felt like an unexpected wave of sisterhood. Women I didn't know, from cities I'd never visit, were clapping for me with their keyboards. They saw the strength in my silence, the message between the lines. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, not as the betrayed wife, not as a victim, but as someone who had taken back the narrative without screaming or begging. I was reclaiming myself, one petal at a time. Of course, Daniel had no idea yet. He was still walking through the world like a man in control of his story. But that story had just been rewritten without his permission, and I wasn't waiting for his reaction. I was done reacting. My part had been played, and now it was his turn to face the echo. I imagined her reading the card over and over, trying to understand if it was kindness or cruelty. But that was the beauty of it. It was neither. It was clarity. I didn't feel petty. I felt precise. There's something powerful about delivering the truth in a way that's undeniable. No drama, no chaos. Just a single moment that cracks the mask open. Vanessa hadn't stolen anything from me. She'd inherited a man I no longer wanted. And now she was holding the proof, not just in flowers, but in every carefully chosen word I left behind. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And I had just sent my silence wrapped in fragrance and fire. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the sun dip below the horizon like it was taking the past with it. The house was quiet, but not heavy. Just still, like it was holding its breath. I sat by the window, letting the hum of the evening settle around me, and thought about how far I'd come in just a few days. There was no plan to burn his life down, no vengeance tantrum, just small, deliberate steps toward peace. My version of closure didn't need chaos. It just needed truth. Somewhere across town, I imagined her holding that bouquet, rereading the card, maybe pacing her apartment, trying to make sense of what she'd just received. I wondered if she'd ask him about it. If he'd lie, if she'd believe him, or if the seed of doubt I planted would quietly start to bloom, like a weed in the middle of what she thought was a garden. That was the thing about deception. It never stays neat. It spreads, and eventually, it consumes. And me? I was already packing. Not just my things, but my peace, my self-respect, my future. I folded clothes with care, not grief. I placed books into boxes without hesitation. Every item I touched, I asked myself, do I want to carry this into my new life? Daniel didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a message for her. It was the start of my exit. Quiet, graceful, permanent. The morning I left, the sky was that pale gray that makes everything feel suspended, like even the weather knew something was ending. I moved through the house like a ghost, barefoot, deliberate, almost reverent. I didn't slam doors or shatter picture frames. I didn't leave mess or noise behind, just space where my presence used to be. I had packed slowly over the past few days, little by little, until only what was mine remained. And now it was time to carry that part of me somewhere new. The bedroom looked bigger without my things. No books on the nightstand, no hairbrush by the mirror, just emptiness. And him, still asleep, blissfully unaware. I stood in the doorway and looked at him one last time. Not with sadness, not even anger. Just detachment. The kind that settles in after you've cried all your tears long before goodbye. I didn't need to wake him. I didn't owe him a monologue. He'd feel it the moment he opened his eyes and realized the silence was permanent. On the kitchen table, I left a single sheet of paper. No flourish, no apology, just my truth, the one he never cared to ask for. You never deserved me. Now you can have her, and everything else that comes with you. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. He would know. He'd read it again and again, searching for some version of me that might still care. But that version was gone. The one who stayed, the one who begged, the one who believed, all gone. I didn't look back when I closed the door. Not once. There was no cinematic pause, no tears brimming in my eyes, just the sound of the lock clicking into place, final, quiet, satisfying. My car was already packed. Every item chosen with intention, like I was curating a new version of myself. I didn't take everything, just what mattered. Clothes I loved, books that had comforted me, photographs where I looked truly happy, not the forced smiles beside a man who barely noticed I was fading. The apartment I moved into wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Small, sunlit, imperfect in all the right ways. The kind of place where I could start over without the weight of pretending. I opened the windows wide and let the breeze sweep through every room, like an exhale I'd been holding for years. I set a coffee mug on the counter, played music I hadn't heard in forever, and watched the dust settle in unfamiliar corners. And for the first time in so long, I felt light. Then came the brunch invites. From women I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. They'd noticed the card online. They had questions. But more than that, they had warmth. They remembered me before I disappeared into Daniel's world, before I dimmed my light to make him feel bigger. And I said yes. I said yes to every coffee date, every late breakfast, every spontaneous walk in the park. Because piece by piece, I wasn't just leaving him, I was returning to myself. I didn't check in on him, not once. I didn't ask mutual friends how he was coping. I didn't scroll through his profiles or try to gauge his reaction. That part of my life was closed. Not out of pride, but peace. And yet, I knew exactly what the silence was doing. I knew how loud it must have felt for him. No calls, no texts, no dramatic confrontation he could twist into victimhood. Just absence. And the note. That one line, sitting alone on the kitchen table like a mirror he couldn't avoid. Every day in my new place brought back little pieces of joy I didn't realize I had lost. The slow mornings, the freedom to cook whatever I wanted. Reading late into the night without tiptoeing, laughing out loud at old sitcoms. It was like I had been underwater for years, and now I was breathing again. Nobody demanding, nobody dismissing, just quiet, the kind that heals instead of hurts. I wasn't rebuilding a life. I was building one that had never been fully mine to begin with, and even in the quiet, I could feel something new taking root. Not revenge, not bitterness. Something softer, something stronger. A freedom that came from letting go, of him, of the pain, of the version of me that tolerated less than I deserved. And while I didn't know exactly what would come next, I knew one thing for sure. The chapter with his name in it was over. And the next one? It was going to be mine, from the very first word. It started with one message, then another, and another. Missed calls, voicemails that stretched into desperate rambles. Claire, please call me. It's not what you think. We need to talk. I didn't even flinch. I watched the notifications pile up like unread chapters from a book I'd already finished. He was scrambling, trying to rewrite history, to soften the edges of his betrayal. But I wasn't interested in revisions. I had lived through the truth, and now I was writing something new, without him. There was a strange satisfaction in not replying, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I didn't owe him anything. I had already said what needed to be said, once, clearly, and silence was my final sentence. He had made his choices, and now he had to sit in the echo of them. I pictured him pacing, phone in hand, confused by my calm. He expected a fight, drama, maybe even a breakdown. But what he got instead was the sound of a woman who had finally moved on. One morning, while sipping coffee on my little balcony, I posted a photo. Nothing dramatic. Just me, glowing, wine glass in hand, laughing under the soft light of a vineyard afternoon. The caption was simple. Turns out letting go of garbage makes room for the good stuff. No names, no details. But everyone knew. The comments rolled in like warm hugs. Thriving. Glowing. She understood the assignment. I didn't need to explain. They felt it. And so did I. The beautiful part wasn't the vineyard or the comments or the glow in my cheeks. It was the feeling inside me, like something had finally unclenched. I wasn't performing happiness. I wasn't trying to convince anyone I was okay. I was okay. More than that, I was light. Lighter than I'd felt in years. Every moment now felt like a quiet celebration. A morning coffee without tension. A slow walk without checking the time. Even silence felt different. Not empty, but full of possibility. I started saying yes more. Yes to brunch invites. Yes to little weekend trips. Yes to laughing too loud and staying out a little too late. I let myself rediscover the parts of me I had tucked away to make room for him. The woman who danced while cooking, who wore bold lipstick for no reason, who took herself out to bookstores just because. I was meeting myself again, not with shame for the years I lost, but with gratitude that I finally came back. And then, just when I wasn't looking for it, something arrived. A knock at the door, a delivery man, flowers in hand. I raised an eyebrow. "For Claire," he said with a knowing smile. The arrangement was different this time. Soft peonies, eucalyptus, a splash of wildflower yellow. And the note? Simple, kind, honest. Not from Daniel, from someone new. Someone whose name I hadn't even mentioned yet, but whose presence had been gently growing in the background of my life. I held the card in my hands a moment longer than I needed to, not because I was hesitant, but because I was present. I read the words again, slowly this time. For no reason other than I thought of you, and smiled. No grand declaration, no promises, just something soft, something sincere. And in that small gesture, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's second thought, just as me, Claire. And that was enough. I placed the flowers in the center of my table, next to a new book and a half-empty mug of tea. There was no need to photograph them, no urge to post. This moment wasn't for applause. It was for me, a reminder that I hadn't just survived. I had bloomed, in quiet, unexpected ways. That even after betrayal, even after loss, life could still offer beauty. Not because someone handed it to me, but because I created space for it. I made room for better. And maybe this new someone would stay. Maybe they wouldn't. But I knew this much. I'd never again shrink to fit inside someone else's story. I had found my voice in the silence, my power in the stillness. And as I opened the window and let the warm air drift in, I knew something for certain. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I was the choice. Finally, fully, and without apology.
Even notice. That's what my 13-year-old niece said while unboxing the $850 phone I had just given her for her birthday. She was laughing. So were the other kids. My brother, her father, chuckled loudest. Her mother shook her head like she was so amused by the harmless joke. 30 people in that backyard. Balloons, cake, music, and not one of them looked shocked. Not one person said, "Hey, that's not okay." They all just smiled, except me. I stood there, holding a plate of half-melted strawberry shortcake, and nodded. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't ask if they really thought so little of me after everything I'd done for them. I just smiled like it didn't hurt. Then I tapped twice on my phone, first to lock the banking app, second to disable every card tied to my account. No more groceries. No more utilities. No more auto payments on the car I leased for my brother 3 years ago when his credit couldn't get him a bicycle. No more college fund deposits for my niece. No more emergency bailouts. No more covering short months just until Friday. I left the party early. No scene. No explanations. Just said I was tired, gave my niece a kiss on the forehead, and wished her a happy birthday. Like her words hadn't just confirmed the truth I'd been afraid to face for years. That night, I packed a single black backpack, laptop, passport, cash, 2 changes of clothes. I left my apartment keys on the counter, canceled the lease, deleted my family's contacts, and disappeared before sunrise. No note, no warning, just the backpack. Inside it, along with the charger cables and toothbrush, was a folder, a sealed envelope labeled in bold black ink. Since you wouldn't notice if I disappeared, here's what you'll Mississippi. I left it on my brother's kitchen table, next to the stack of bills I used to pay for him. I wasn't supposed to be the one who held it all together. Growing up, my brother Jordan was the golden one. Charismatic, athletic, charming in a way that made people excuse everything. My mom used to joke, Naomi gets straight A's, but Jordan gets people to clap for him. They clapped through every mess he made, through his suspended license, failed business ventures, his second DUI. Meanwhile, I got a pat on the head and a reminder to be responsible whenever I asked for help with college forms or rent during grad school. Still, I didn't push back. I figured that's what older sisters do. They lead by example. They clean up quietly. So I got a degree in finance, found a decent job, and started sending money home the minute I could. At first, it was small. $100 here, $200 there when Jordan just needed help with daycare. But it grew. By 27, I was paying part of his mortgage. By 29, I had taken over the car note for a vehicle I didn't drive, just to keep his family mobile. When his wife, Sierra, was between jobs, I covered groceries and utilities just for 2 months. 2 turned into 12. They said thank you. Sometimes. But over time, the gratitude dried up. It wasn't a gift anymore. It was an expectation. They'd say things like, "You're lucky you don't have kids. You make more than we do. It's easy for you. You know family means helping without keeping score." But they kept score in their own way. Every holiday became a test. How much could I give? How quietly could I give it? And how easily could I be overlooked afterward? When I forgot to send my niece a birthday gift 2 years ago, Sierra told me she cried. Jordan texted, "You know how much she looks up to you." So this year I went big. The newest iPhone, a limited edition case, personalized accessories. And in return, she giggled at my existence like I was a joke her father had taught her to laugh at. Dad says if you disappeared tomorrow, that line didn't come from nowhere. It was inherited, absorbed, casually passed down over dinner tables. I helped fund. And I realized something. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't even family. I was just a bank account with a heartbeat. Until I decided to shut down the account and walk away, not just from the bills, but from the idea that love was something I had to buy to be respected. That birthday party wasn't the first red flag. It was just the first time they didn't bother to hide it. The signs had been there for years. Little things, paper cuts that didn't bleed until they all hit at once. Like the time I paid for Jordan's car repair and asked him to send me the invoice for records. He laughed and said, "You're not the IRS, Naomi. Relax." Or when Sierra casually mentioned in front of mutual friends that I was basically the safety net of the family, followed by a sip of wine and a smirk like she was proud of the arrangement. They made me the fallback plan, then mocked me for being stable. But the clearest sign? My niece. She'd always been sweet as a kid. But over the last year or two, something shifted. She stopped calling me Aunt Naomi. Started calling me Naomi instead, like I was an employee at a store. Asked me how much money I made. Said things like, "Dad says you're lucky to have us, or you'd be totally alone." At first, I blamed social media. Then I blamed her age. But that day at the party, I realized she was just repeating what she heard. She didn't come up with that on her own. She was mimicking the script her parents gave her. Jordan had built this narrative that I was bitter, that I was lonely, that I had no life outside of helping them. And the worst part, I had proven him right for a long time. Because I didn't set boundaries. Because I said yes to things that felt like no. Because I gave them everything, and they never thought I'd take anything back. Even my mom, before she passed, once said, "You can't expect people to thank you forever for doing the right thing." She meant it as wisdom, but it felt like a warning. Because what's the right thing when the people you're sacrificing for are teaching their child to laugh at your existence? And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just carelessness. It was contempt with a smile. They didn't forget I mattered. They actively decided I didn't. And once you realize you've been downgraded from person to provider, there's no unseeing it. So I made peace with what I had to do. Not out of rage, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Because if they could teach a child that my disappearance wouldn't matter, then I'd show them what my absence really looked like. When I left that party, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even drive home angry. I just rolled the windows down and let the wind wash over me like water on old paint. By the time I got back to my apartment, the plan had already begun forming. I didn't want drama. I wanted distance. Permanent, untouchable distance. First, I logged into every banking and payment system I'd ever used to support them. My name was everywhere: utility bills, emergency funds, shared family apps. I disconnected all of it. I froze the credit card Jordan used for gas emergencies. I closed the joint account I'd opened to help manage my niece's future college fund. It had been sitting empty for months. They hadn't contributed a single dollar. Then I checked the lease on my apartment. Month to month. Easy. I found a short-term sublet 3 cities away. No questions asked, fully furnished. Paid the first 3 months up front in cash. Next, I clear my digital footprint. New email. New number. Password resets on everything. I logged out of all shared Netflix, Spotify, and Hulu accounts they still used under my name. And I changed those passwords too, not out of pettiness, out of precision. Because if I was going to disappear, I was going to do it completely. I backed up what I needed, cleared out my personal storage unit, dropped off 2 boxes at a donation center, and sold off what I didn't want to carry. What I kept fit into 1 bag. Black backpack. Simple. Durable. Mine. Inside, I placed a few essentials. My passport. My laptop. A USB drive with all my financial records. 2 sets of clothes. A picture of my mother, taken before she got sick, smiling, arms around me at a park when I was 8. And 1 folder. Inside it, a single document titled, "Everything I paid for, so you don't have to wonder." It listed every major payment I'd ever made for my brother and his family. Dates, amounts, categories. I wasn't trying to shame them. I was just making it real. Because people like them never think the person holding them up will actually let go. They think the guilt will keep you around. But guilt is a leash, and I had just slipped out of mine. That night, before I left town, I dropped the backpack off at Jordan's house. Quietly. No knock. No text. Just placed it on the kitchen table, using the spare key I was never supposed to keep. I knew they'd find it, and when they opened it, they'd finally understand what it meant to joke about someone's disappearance, and then feel it. The morning after I vanished, I turned off my phone and left it in a drawer. It buzzed 22 times in the first hour. Jordan, Sierra, a few cousins, even my niece. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I sat on a balcony 3 cities away, wrapped in a sweater, sipping black coffee I didn't have to share. I stared at a street I didn't recognize, full of people who didn't know me, and felt something strange settle in my chest. Relief. Not because they were finally calling, but because I no longer had to care. The silence I gave them wasn't punishment, it was education. And apparently the first lesson hit hard. According to a mutual friend who didn't know I'd left on purpose, Jordan showed up at my apartment the next day, banging on the door, shouting my name. He called the leasing office. They told him I'd moved out. No forwarding address. No contact info. He looked stunned, apparently. Said it wasn't like me. The next day, he opened the backpack. My friend said Sierra called her crying. Not because I was gone, but because the college fund was real and now closed. Then came the dominoes. Their utility bills bounced. The car payment was rejected. The phone lines went unpaid. Even the Hulu subscription cut out mid-show. It wasn't rage that followed. It was desperation dressed as concern. Voicemails rolled in like waves. "Naomi, this isn't funny. Where are you? I know things got tense, but you can't just disappear. You didn't even say goodbye to your niece. We're family. They only remembered I was family after I stopped behaving like a servant. They only noticed I was gone after the flow of benefits dried up. My niece messaged me, too. A shaky apology. I didn't mean what I said. I was just repeating what Dad said. I'm sorry. Please come back. I felt a pang, a sharp, unexpected one, but I let it pass because I knew it wasn't her fault. She was just born into their script, and I'd lived in that script for too long. So I stayed gone. I built routines, bought groceries for one, found a new therapist, started writing again, opened a savings account that had only my name on it, learned how it felt to buy something without calculating who else I had to take care of first. And every day I didn't hear from them, I healed a little more. Eventually, the messages stopped. No apology, no real remorse, just a silence that used to terrify me and now freed me. I didn't need closure. I didn't need payback, because they finally understood the one thing they never respected before. What I gave them had value, and now it was gone. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It came in layers, cracks widening slowly, like a house built on sand after the waters pulled away. A month after I disappeared, Jordan and Sierra showed up to a family gathering without gifts, without smiles, and, according to my cousin Maya, without pride. People asked where I was. They said I was going through something. Maya told me later that Sierra tried to laugh it off. She's just emotional. You know Naomi, always sensitive. But when someone asked, "Didn't she pay for your car?" Sierra's smile faltered. They didn't know what to say when people stopped laughing, because I wasn't there to make it easy anymore. Then came the job drama. Jordan lost a freelance contract after his credit score tanked for missed payments on the car I'd stopped covering. The car itself was repossessed one morning while he was inside a gas station. A friend caught the whole thing on video, him running out, coffee in hand, yelling at the tow truck. It made it to a local meme page with the caption, "When your family backup vanishes mid-fantasy." Sierra had to move back in with her sister when their rent jumped and they couldn't cover it. They sold the expensive gadgets. The iPhone I bought for my niece? Gone. The little luxuries they used to justify while I was paying the essentials? All vanished. But worse than the money was the exposure. People started talking. Because when the resource leaves, so does the illusion. Jordan had always painted himself as the big brother who held the family together. But people started seeing the truth. He was leaning on someone he disrespected. At church, people asked where Naomi was. At school, my niece had to explain why they moved again. The golden house of cards image my family had curated, stable, put together, blessed, it crumbled. And the black backpack? They never mentioned it again. But I know they read every word inside that envelope. Because when Maya went over to help Sierra pack, she saw it sitting in the closet. Untouched, preserved like it still held a chance to be undone. But it couldn't be, because that backpack didn't just contain a list. It contained a boundary, the first one I ever enforced. And like most firsts, it changed everything. People think walking away means you're running from something. But I wasn't running. I was finally walking toward something. Toward myself. I spent the first few weeks in silence, reading, journaling, sleeping without alarms, and eating food that didn't come from a takeout bag someone else charged to my account. It was strange at first hearing no one call my name. No one asking for anything. No guilt hovering over every breath I took. But eventually the quiet became a song. And I started to live. I picked up freelance consulting work, nothing heavy, just a few clients I chose on my own terms. One of them was a nonprofit that helped low-income women understand credit, budgeting, and financial abuse. I read the stories, helped rebuild ruined credit reports, and slowly realized I wasn't just healing. I was helping others heal, too. I found a cozy studio with hardwood floors and big windows. No shared utilities. No one else on the lease. Just mine. I hung up art for the first time. Cooked real meals. Even bought myself a new coffee maker. One no one else would break or borrow. I got a cat. Named her Indy. She doesn't ask for much. Just a quiet lap and a warm sunbeam. We get each other. One afternoon, while cleaning out the last of my storage bins, I found an old sticky note my mom had written me in college. Don't let them mistake your silence for weakness. Love, Mom. I cried for a long time when I read that. Not because I was sad, but because, in a way, she saw this moment long before I did. She knew what it meant to give without boundaries. And she knew the cost. I framed the note and placed it by my door. A reminder, silence isn't surrender. It's strategy. The last piece of closure came when I got a letter from my niece. Handwritten. I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it. I was trying to sound cool. I didn't know what you did for us. I know now. She ended it with, I hope you're happy, Aunt Naomi. I miss you. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I kept the letter. Because maybe one day I'll tell her the whole story. Not to make her feel bad, but to help her learn something no one ever taught me. That being kind doesn't mean being used. And being family doesn't mean being furniture. It's been 6 months. The texts have stopped. The apologies faded. The panic quieted. And in their place, something bloomed. Not spite. Not victory. Space. Real, uninterrupted space. The kind you don't realize you need until you stop giving pieces of yourself away just to feel included. I still think about them sometimes. Not with anger. With clarity. I remember birthdays spent organizing gifts I paid for. Holidays where I stood behind camera, capturing moments I wasn't invited to be part of. Conversations where I laughed on cue, even when the joke was at my expense. But now, I go to cafes alone, read books without checking my phone. I dance while folding laundry. I sit on the floor just because I can. I exist unobserved and unrequired. And it's the freest I've ever been. The black backpack I left behind, I know they still have it, probably tucked away somewhere, probably untouched but never forgotten, because what I gave them that day wasn't just silence or absence. It was a mirror. Everything they found inside, the receipts, the list, the boundaries, the exit, that was the reflection of who I had been all along and the line they never thought I'd draw. Maybe one day they'll talk about it honestly. Maybe they'll tell the truth. But I'm not waiting for that. I'm building something else. My own story, a life not lived in the shadows of "you're so helpful," or "we'd be lost without you." They always said I was the quiet one, the soft one, the one who'd never walk away. They were right until the day they finally gave me the reason to. I don't know where they are now. I don't ask, and I don't look back, because when someone jokes that your disappearance wouldn't matter, there's only one thing left to do. Make it unforgettable. Breath. No hands holding mine. No whispered prayers. No tearful goodbyes from the people who should have been there. In the room next to ours, I could hear soft sobbing, the rustle of hands clutched together. A family saying goodbye the way we all hoped to, together, messy, loud with love. But mine? Silent. My husband, Evan, never came. Neither did my siblings, Rachel and Aaron. No calls. No texts. Just a blank thread and a colder silence than the hospital air. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I'd been waiting for this moment for days, maybe years, as Dad slipped further away. Each visit had been a little quieter, a little harder to watch. But I never missed a day, even when he stopped speaking, even when he barely opened his eyes. I stayed. I didn't expect them to, really. Evan had work. My siblings had lives. They had all chosen their distance long before the heart monitor began its final song. The doctor gently rested his hand on my shoulder and spoke in a low, rehearsed voice. Time of death, 3:17 a.m. And just like that, it was over. I stood there, still and upright, while the room buzzed with quiet movements, the nurse turning off machines, removing IVs. I'd barely registered them, until one of the nurses, a woman I hadn't seen before, stepped forward and looked directly at me. She didn't say her name. She just handed me a thick, sealed envelope. He asked me to give this to you. Only you. After. The envelope was cream-colored, old-fashioned, and heavy. My name, Celeste, written in his handwriting. No, to my daughter. No date, just my name. I took it with both hands like it might break. Later, after I signed the forms, shook hands with the chaplain, and left the building, I sat in my car and stared at the envelope on my lap. I knew my father well. He wasn't dramatic. He didn't believe in letters or grand gestures. So whatever was in this had to matter. I opened it with trembling fingers. What I found inside didn't just rewrite everything I believed about him. It changed how I saw my entire family, and it gave me the key to take back something I didn't even know I'd lost. My father wasn't warm, not in the way other dads were. He wasn't the hug you at the door, I'm proud of you kind of parent. His love came through in grocery bags dropped off when I was struggling in grad school, in checking the oil in my car when I visited, in nods across the room that said, I see you. But he never missed a moment that mattered. Unlike everyone else. My husband, Evan, used to be charming. In the beginning, he said all the right things, supportive, ambitious, full of ideas. But somewhere between our second anniversary and his third job change, I became the background character in my own marriage. The one who paid the bills, made the meals, and absorbed his cold moods like a sponge. He hated visiting the hospital, claimed it drained his spirit, said watching someone die was too depressing. When I asked him to come with me to see my father just once, he said, I was never close to him. But my siblings? Their absence hurt more. Rachel and Aaron were born performers. Rachel taught yoga and lived on Instagram. All soft quotes and weekend retreats. Aaron managed a marketing firm, only spoke in business metaphors, and hadn't said, I love you since high school. Dad didn't fit into their lives anymore. Too rigid, too honest. They stopped visiting him after he sold the lake house. Said he was being selfish, liquidating our memories without consulting anyone. Never mind that they hadn't paid a dime for it. I was the only one who kept coming back. I showed up every Sunday, even when he didn't remember my name. I brought books to read aloud, played the jazz records he loved, refilled his water even when nurses told me they had it covered. And still no one joined me. No phone calls. No guilt. Like we'd already buried him before the machines did. But that night, the letter changed something. It wasn't a will. It wasn't a list of regrets. It was a blueprint to something he'd kept secret, something deliberate, something meant for me and no one else. In that letter, he told the truth about everything. About Rachel, about Aaron, about Evan, about the real reason they stopped showing up, and the real plan he'd been working on while everyone else turned away. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was an invitation and a warning. The letter wasn't long, just 2 pages, handwritten, folded with care. But the words inside it were heavy. Celeste, they've been circling like vultures. Don't trust the silence. It isn't ignorance. It's intent. At first, I didn't know what he meant. But when I read further, it became clearer. My father hadn't just noticed the distance between us all. He had documented it. He wrote that shortly after his diagnosis, Rachel and Aaron approached him separately, each suggesting early estate planning. They asked about properties, bank accounts, even my mother's jewelry, gone for nearly a decade. Neither of them ever mentioned care, or visits, or what he wanted. Just assets. My father told them he was leaving everything in a trust, no details, just that it was taken care of. He said their interest cooled quickly after that. Rachel stopped calling altogether. Aaron visited once, brought a bottle of wine, stayed 20 minutes and never returned. My father noted it in the letter like a bookkeeper tracking debt. He left the cork on the counter and didn't say goodbye. He wrote that Evan, my husband, had visited too. Only once. Alone. That part turned my stomach. I had no idea he'd gone. Apparently, Evan told my father that Celeste doesn't need to know everything. That it was time to manage expectations about inheritance. That he could help ease the process. A phrase so cold it felt like steel across my skin. Dad ended that section of the letter with, I saw enough that day to know the difference between blood and loyalty. And suddenly everything made sense. The distance. The convenient busyness. The way Evan stopped asking about my visits. The way Rachel blocked me when I reminded her about Dad's birthday. The way Aaron always changed the subject when I mentioned the hospital. They weren't just pulling away. They were cutting me out. Not just emotionally, financially, strategically. And they thought he wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't notice. But he did. And now, so how'd I? In the final paragraph, my father wrote, there's something you need to find. It's not in a safety deposit box. It's not in a bank. It's where the truth belongs, right where they least expect it. He didn't say what, just where to look. But the one thing I now knew for certain? His silence wasn't weakness. It was patience. He'd watched them erase him. And now he'd left me the match. The clue in the letter was vague, intentionally so. It's not in a safety deposit box. It's not in a bank. It's where the truth belongs, right where they least expect it. My first thought? The house. Not the big one. Not the family home Rachel once called soulless and Aaron barely acknowledged after Mom passed. That house had been sold off 5 years ago. But my father had another place. A smaller one. A cabin. He'd bought it quietly after the sale, deep in the woods about 2 hours north, near a lake where he used to fish as a young man. I'd only been there once. Helped him paint the porch, fix the screen door. It was peaceful, unremarkable. I'd forgotten about it until that line in the letter snapped it back into memory. They wouldn't look there. They didn't even know it existed. And that's exactly why it had to be the place. I took a day off work and told no one. Not Evan, not Rachel, not Aaron. I packed a bag, filled the gas tank, and drove through quiet highways until the signs thinned out and the road curved into trees. The cabin looked the same, modest, still a little weather-worn. The key was still hidden under the flower pot. I let myself in. Everything was just as he'd left it. A pile of unread newspapers on the table. A jacket over the back of a chair. His favorite book, 100 Years of Solitude. Still dog-eared at page 219. And then I saw it. A small safe tucked behind the fireplace panel, the one I helped him install. He once joked that if the apocalypse ever came, he'd store coffee and jazz records in there. Now I knew better. I found the key inside a teacup in the kitchen. And when I turned it, what I saw inside made me sit down hard. There were documents, photos, a thumb drive, a second envelope with my name, and a certified copy of a new will, signed and notarized, dated 4 months ago. I opened it with shaking hands. Everything, the cabin, his savings, remaining investments, retirement accounts, even the rare coin collection he never talked about. All of it was left to me. Only me. And attached to the will, in his crisp handwriting. If they didn't show up to say goodbye, they don't deserve to show up for what I left behind. He'd planned this. All of it. They had bet on him being weak. But he'd saved his strength for one final move. And now it was my turn to make one. I didn't tell them anything right away. I returned from the cabin the same way I left, silent, unannounced, controlled. Evan barely noticed I'd been gone. He asked if I was feeling better now that the funeral arrangements were over. I nodded. He didn't ask where I'd been. I didn't offer. That weekend, I contacted my father's attorney, a woman named Evelyn, sharp as a knife and twice as quiet. She confirmed what I already knew. My father had updated the will in full, with witnesses and airtight documentation. And he had made one special request. The reading of the will must take place in person. No advance notice. No previews. All beneficiaries present or forfeited. Classic Dad. He hated phone calls. Believed important things should be said face to face. Even now, he was forcing them to look me and each other in the eye. Evelyn handled the invites. We set the meeting for a Tuesday evening in her office. I told Evan it was a formality and that my siblings had been invited as well. He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Maybe he thought there'd be something in it for him. The truth? There wouldn't be. When we arrived, Rachel was already seated, sunglasses on indoors, sipping overpriced bottled water. Aaron came in 5 minutes late, Bluetooth earpiece still in, and barely acknowledged me. Evan sat beside me and checked his watch 3 times in 10 minutes. Finally, Evelyn entered. She looked at each of us and gave a brief, polite smile. Then she opened the folder. This is the last will and testament of Thomas Emmanuel Ward, dated 4 months prior to his passing. I watched Rachel's posture stiffen. Aaron leaned forward, clearly expecting to hear numbers. Evelyn read everything. Slowly, clearly. Property, investments, the cabin, the coin collection, liquid assets. And every line ended with the same words. To my daughter, Celeste Ward. Nothing for Rachel. Nothing for Aaron. Nothing for Evan. Rachel laughed, short and high-pitched. Aaron said, "This must be a mistake." Evan turned to me with disbelief. as if he just realized I'd been playing chess while they all played checkers. But the best moment? When Evelyn pulled out the final envelope, the one labeled in the event of disputes. Inside was a flash drive. She plugged it into a small speaker, and my father's voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, you chose absence. Celeste chose presence. The difference between the two is everything. No one spoke after that, because what could they say? They had disappeared when it counted, and now, so had their inheritance. The fallout started before we even left the building. Rachel stormed out first, knocking over the sleek chrome water stand in the hallway as she passed. I heard her mutter something about lawyers and exploitation. She didn't look back. Aaron stayed a little longer, asking Evelyn ridiculous questions like whether digital wills were enforceable and whether my father had been influenced. You mean manipulated? Evelyn asked flatly. He didn't answer. Evan didn't say a word until we got to the car. He sat behind the wheel in silence for a full minute before turning to me. Did you know about this? I stared at him. Would it have mattered if I did? His jaw clenched. You could have said something. So could you, I replied, like the part where you visited my dying father behind my back. That shut him up. We didn't speak the rest of the way home. Over the next week, I heard the rest of the collapse through whispers, texts, and secondhand sources. Rachel made a dramatic post online, something about betrayal, false narratives, and staying strong despite cruelty. Her yoga followers cheered her on, but some of our relatives saw through it. A cousin messaged me privately. Your dad was no fool. Whatever he did, I'm sure it was earned. Aaron tried to contest the will, filed an official inquiry with Evelyn's office. He didn't get far. My father had anticipated everything. Evelyn sent him a PDF of a signed statement, video witness, time-stamped, and backed by a full psychiatric evaluation. Ironclad. Aaron dropped the challenge within 48 hours. But Evan? Evan was the real surprise. Not because he left. Because he didn't. Instead, he got cold. Then clingy. Then strategic. Flowers. Breakfasts. That sudden spark in his eye he used to have when he saw potential. He saw money now. He thought he could pivot. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already met with a divorce attorney. Quietly. Confidently. Because the cabin, the inheritance, the trust, they were all protected. My father had made sure of it. Anything earned through the estate was off limits unless I chose to share it, which I wouldn't, because that wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. And justice didn't need noise. It just needed to hold. For the first time in years, my mornings were quiet, and they stayed that way. No Evan pacing the kitchen, pretending to look busy while avoiding questions. No passive-aggressive texts from Rachel. No guilt-laced silence from Aaron. Just coffee, birds, and space. I stayed in the cabin for a week after the will reading. At first, I just sat, in silence, letting it all settle. I cooked, read, took walks by the lake. There was no luxury, no marble countertops or manicured hedges. But I breathed easier than I had in a decade. I opened my father's thumb drive on the third day. Inside were scans of old family photos, letters I'd written him as a child, and a folder titled, For Her Future. Inside were financial breakdowns, property transfers, legal instructions, and a note. Don't let them rewrite your story, Celeste. Own it. I did. Back in the city, I filed for divorce. I didn't warn Evan. I didn't explain. The papers arrived at his office on a Wednesday. He texted me 2 words. You're serious? I didn't respond. I moved into a small condo under the name of a holding trust Evelyn helped me set up, fully funded by the cabin sale and a portion of the estate. The rest went into investments. Quiet ones, smart ones, and I started writing again. Not for work, for me, about grief, about inheritance, about being the person in the room no one thinks will speak until she does. One piece went viral, a short essay titled The Last One Standing. No names, just truth. I began consulting part-time, helping women navigate legal empowerment, how to read a will, how to protect an inheritance, how to walk away before someone steals your worth. One client told me, "You don't talk like someone who lost everything." I smiled. That's because I didn't. I finally kept something for myself. I didn't hear from Rachel or Aaron again, and Evan eventually stopped emailing. But I did receive one letter months later from my niece, Rachel's daughter. "Mom says I shouldn't reach out, but I wanted to thank you for the books you sent when I was little. I still have them. I hope you're okay. You always seemed like the only honest one." I cried reading that, not because I was sad, because I realized I wasn't invisible. I was just quiet enough for people to assume I'd never step forward. They were wrong. I visit the lake once a year now, not because I need to, because I want to. It's quiet there, not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask anything of you. The kind of peace my father must have found when he chose that cabin over company. I bring wildflowers, a folding chair, a flask of tea. Sometimes I sit for hours and say nothing. Other times I read. Once, I even laughed out loud, not at a memory but at myself. At how long I waited for people to choose me, when all along I could have chosen myself. My father didn't leave me wealth to spoil me. He left it to free me, to protect me from people who used love like leverage, from a husband who saw me as a support beam, from siblings who saw me as a wallet, from a life where silence was mistaken for softness and softness mistaken for weakness. Before he died, he didn't say much, just held my hand and looked at me for a long time. Now, I understand what that look meant. It was a goodbye, yes, but it was also a passing of the torch. Not a burden, but power. Real, quiet, irreversible power. There's a journal entry I wrote the night I moved into the condo. Just 6 words. I will not be erased again. I still keep that page bookmarked, because that's the real inheritance. Not the cabin, not the money, not the will. The reminder that I was never the invisible one. I was just surrounded by people who refused to see. Now, they can watch from a distance. They can wonder what I'm doing. They can feel the silence they once gifted me and sit in it themselves. Because I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Done proving. Done waiting. Done giving away pieces of myself just to be invited to a table I helped build. And when people ask why I walked away without a fight, I just smile and say, some stories don't end with a bang. Some end with a woman standing at the edge of a lake, knowing she never needed to scream to be heard.